A Murder of Ghosts. Written by Evie is Evil. Chapter 4. Trigger warnings for this chapter include graphic depiction of injury, panic attacks, and medical stuff. Danny carried the boy, flying as fast as he could towards the tundra of the far frozen. Luckily, the ghost zone worked in his favor. When he needed to find places, they often found him faster. He wasn't flying for long before the snowy tundra of the far frozen swallowed him up in white. "Frostbite! Frostbite!" Danny called. He reached down and pulled the boy's cape up a bit to shield him from the cold. Danny should really come up with something to call the kid. It feels weird not having anything to address him by. Names. R. He looked down at the yellow embroidered R on the kid's chest. R. Red. He is wearing a lot of red. He'll go with that for now, at least until he can get a name out of Red himself. He continued to trudge through the snow until he reached Frostbite's village. "Frostbite!" he called out again. "Young one?" The large Yeti emerged from a crowd of other Yetis bustling around a frozen village. "Frostbite, you gotta help!" Upon spotting the broken boy in Danny's arms, Frostbite straightened up and called attention to a couple Yetis near him. "What happened, young one? Is this one of your friends?" The Yeti doctor gently lifted Red from Danny's arms and began walking briskly into one of the caves nearby. "Get me a bed set up," he directed to two Yetis walking at his side. "I need the human medical supplies brought in promptly." The two scampered off to do as was told. "I don't know what happened. Cujo brought me to him. Is he dead? I couldn't feel a pulse." "I will check him out, young one. The lack of pulse indicates death, but the color of his blood is quite uncommon for ghosts found in the infinite realms. Anything else you can report on?" "He was awake at one point, and he can feel his injuries. He flinched when I squeezed his wrist." That is certainly something to note. Will he be all right?" "I will do what I can, young one. I promise you that," Frostbite replied with a reassuring smile. The three approached a secluded room with a medical cot set up. Above the cot was one of those large reflective lights, and it was on. Two other Yetis were standing by, dressed in paper masks and gowns. On metal trays by the bedside were different metal tools, such as scissors, scalpels, and needles. On another tray was a variety of bandages and plasters. Frostbite shoved his way to the bed and gently placed Red down on it. "Snowclaw, could you take a blood sample? Blizzardwind, please go fetch an ectosensor and a dressing gown." Both Yeti doctors rushed to complete the tasks they were given. Frostbite settled by the bedside. He had one paw around Red's wrist, checking for a pulse, while he took note of more visible injuries. "Young one, would you help me? I need assistance removing the patient's clothing." Oh, sure." Danny floated in from the corner of the room. "What do you need me to do?" "Could you grab his shoes and bottoms? Leave undergarments, those aren't necessary. Snowclaw, could you help me with his shirt?" "Yes, Chief," she replied, quickly packing away the blood sample she took. In sync, they heaved him forward, and Snowclaw held him up while Frostbite maneuvered his tunic and cape off. Danny couldn't help but stare at the bruising on Red's ribs. It was a modeling of red, purples, blacks, and yellows. One half was burned, similar to his face, and Danny couldn't help but wince. Blizzardwind returned at this point, with a hospital gown in one paw, and a monitor on a stand in another. "Thank you, Blizzardwind," Frostbite acknowledged. With the obstructions gone, Frostbite was finally able to assess the damage. And it was a lot. Danny was now glad he hadn't died as gruesome a death. "Divide and conquer. Blizzardwind, can you treat the burn wounds? Snowclaw, I need you to reset his hands and I will treat his legs." Danny just stood back, watching the doctor's work. He entered a sort of daze. The clipped communications of the Yetis zapped through his brain, rattling about each time they spoke. He became a little more aware as the boy was halfway through being bandaged. Medical devices were being hooked up and needles inserted into his arm. Wires trailed from Red's chest to different machines displaying numbers, lines, symbols, things Danny couldn't process. At this point, Danny was feeling a little sick. He got up and left the room, parting the pale blue curtains hanging over the entrance to the room. He found himself in a plastic waiting room chair and curled up atop it. I didn't know the Far Frozen even had these.
Young one, are you all right?
Danny hummed, blinking his eyes free of dryness and looking away from a blank rocky wall to meet Frostbite's eyes. The hulking giant was crouched at his side, staring concerningly into his eyes.
Are you all right?
The doctor repeated, a furrow forming in his brow.
Oh, I'm
fine, Danny slowly replied.
I have to apologize. That was too much for you. I sometimes forget that medical things can be quite traumatizing for youth.
Frostbite had a sympathetic glint in his eyes.
Yeah,
he sighed.
This was a bit much. I can still remember the hospital after my accident. I didn't realize seeing someone else in that position would trigger me. I must apologize again. I should have sent you to wait outside from the beginning.
No, I honestly think that would have made it worse.
I see.
Danny could tell he didn't really see.
How is he?
Danny changed the subject.
Like, what have you found out? Why is he dead, but not? Well, using an ectoscanner, we found an extremely underdeveloped core. He is definitely liminal and dead, but the question on whether he is a ghost is still questionable. How does that work? How can he be dead but not a ghost? Well, there are a few, such as the undead, most notably zombies, or some type of ghosts register more under the undead category than ghosts, such as revenants.
Danny scrunches his nose up in confusion.
That makes zero sense.
Frostbite chuckles at this.
Yes, I suppose it is a little silly, young one. I will have to continue a few more tests to see.
Frostbite stands, slapping his claws on his knees like a Midwesterner trying to leave a chatty neighbor's house. It makes Danny giggle.
Would you like to accompany back into the room of our friend?
Sure, I guess. Danny grabbed the paw Frostbite had extended. Inside the room again, most of the metal trays had been removed. Medical devices surrounded the cot instead, notably lacking the distinct beeping common with human monitors. Red was lying in the cot, more bandaged than Boy at this point. More than half his face was bandaged, but it was cleaner than the last he saw it. Red had freckles peppering the cheek he could see. His eyes were then drawn to a white streak in the boy's hair, poking through the bandages.
I wonder if that was always there.
His legs were enveloped in thick casts, and his hands had splints on most of the fingers. His wrists were bandaged along with the entirety of his left arm, and he had more bandages peeking out around the edges of his dressing gown. In his right arm was an IV with a steady drip of green ectoplasm. There were also a dozen electrode wires peeking out from the neck hole of the dressing gown hooked up to numerous machines. Red looked so small and tired laying there in the bed. Danny couldn't help but be reminded of his own hospital stay after his accident. He woke up, numerous times confused, alone and in pain, beeping of machines and sterile smells as his only companions. He can vividly remember being cold. Cold, 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 all the time. Danny leaned forward, tugging a folded blanket up from the end of the bed, and laid it over Red before tucking in the edges. He hesitated, hands hovering, before he settled one on Red's knee over the blanket and squeezed gently. With his other hand, he pulled out his PDA and opened his texts. Danny.
Sorry guys, couldn't play tonight.
Ghost thing came up. Frowny face. Tucker. Don't sweat it, bud. Sam. I kicked Tucker's ass for you. 07. Danny. Thanks, Sam. Smiley face. Danny smiled before switching over to the conversation with his sister. Jazz. Danny, are you okay? Jazz. Text me when you get this. Danny. I'm good. The ghost thing taking longer than I thought. Jazz. Danny! Frostbite peeked over Danny's shoulder.
Is that young one's sister? Tell her I said hello.
Danny snickered. Danny. Frostbite says hi. Jazz. Oh! Hello, Frostbite. Jazz. Let me know when you're coming home, Danny. You have school on Monday. Danny rolled his eyes. Danny. Yes, Mom. Exasperated face. Jazz. And Danny? Danny. Yes. Jazz. Please remember to eat. Danny. I will. Heart emoji. I'm going to read the author's notes because they're funny. Author's notes. The more I write, the more excited I get, and the harder it becomes to stay on a consistent posting schedule. Stay in the box. No! Stay in the box. No! Get out of my head! And reader's notes. I should have thought of those before I started talking. Same note as on my Sound of Damian Wayne post, which might actually be coming out after this. I'm back in my apartment for uni, and you might hear some sounds because my window, you can hear stuff through it, most notably sirens. And my neighbor, you can hear anytime he turns on water, so that'll be fun. Yeah, I hope to keep updating this. These are pretty fun. Bye!